You call me a bitch? I'm white because I don't want to talk to you? To me, street harassment, it's an invasion of space, an invasion of privacy.
In general, I think it is any unwanted attention in public spaces. And when people use the term street harassment, they usually are talking about gender-based street harassment, meaning men targeting women. But I also think it has a much broader definition. People get harassed based on sexual orientation, based on race, disability. Somebody in a position of power perceives as less powerful than them can be targeted for harassment, which I think is just a way of reinforcing the power dynamics.
Street harassment is a global social practice designed to intimidate and control targeted groups of people.
Street harassment is unwanted words or actions between strangers in public spaces, and it's motivated by gender or sexual orientation. A lot of street harassment is categorized as sexual harassment or gender policing.
In my opinion, street harassment is any unwanted attention, whether it be physical touch, words, verbally, eye contact in a public space.
Harassing comments, to gestures, to leering, along to groping and assaults, stalking and public flashing and public masturbation.
I was 16 years old at the time, and there would be men hanging out on the street. And at the time, I didn't have a name for what street harassment was. I just referred to it as the men on the street bothering me. And they would say things like, hey, baby, and hey, shorty. And I could easily at the time say, well, I'm only 16, you know, this makes me uncomfortable. And they would back off. But when I turned 18, and I'm not one who lies about her age, I turned 18 and they were still doing this, and I would say, well, I'm 18. You're old enough. So what I had known as the men on the street bothering me was my earliest instance with street harassment.
I got in such trouble the summer I was 9 because I wouldn't go to the corner store anymore. There were a group of teenagers hanging out at the corner store making little comments about my little 9-year-old body, and I felt humiliated and confused and scared and creeped out. I hate feeling afraid, I hate feeling helpless, I hate feeling angry all the time walking down the street. That's no way to live. I hate bullies. I can't stand bullies. And I became a martial artist because I wanted to not feel afraid, you know? Being little and female in any city on the planet makes you feel kind of this low-grade anxiety. I don't want to carry that baggage. And I found out that I loved martial arts. Sometimes you find that you're good at something you never expect you'd be good at. The first martial arts class I took was judo at the YMCA with the guys in upstate New York. And man, within weeks I could throw a 250-pound man over my shoulder. I love the feeling of that. It was very liberating. Not that you should generally do that without reason, right? Unless they really deserve it, you shouldn't go around throwing guys around. But it was very freeing too, and it made me feel confident, you know? Unlike a gun, which somebody can take away from you, nobody can take your martial arts skills away from you. And here it is many years later, and I continue to teach martial arts of all kinds, but I love the fact that it is something that's always with you. It's portable, and you can use it when you need it, and it works. I'm not standing here going, oh, eek, save me. Get down, you're gonna run your way out. This is a strong hold, you're gonna run. Reach in like a helicopter through there, grab your fist,
I remember the first time that I was harassed. I was probably around 11, which from my work is really common that it starts around that age. My first serious incident that I remember exactly, as opposed to 11, which is a little vague to me, is when I was 16 and I was driving home from a friend's house. I must have just gotten my driver's license. I stopped at a stoplight at 16th and Military, for anybody who lives in DC. I stopped at a stoplight and a guy was leaning against the railing masturbating. And it was kind of interesting now that I look back on it, because I drove home and I told my parents, and I was like, oh my God, this disgusting, horrible, you know, blah, 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 blah. And my mom said, you know, that's illegal. We could report it to the police. And first of all, props to Mom, because so many people's parents don't have that kind of response. And the other thing is, it totally had never occurred to me. You know, I just thought it was like some gross problem, not that it was a crime. And when I was younger and walked a lot more, I felt like I was a target all the time. I used to walk from my house to my work every day. It was about a mile, 20-minute walk, and then home, and I felt like I had been, you know, run a gauntlet every day, both ways. It was incredibly exhausting, enraging. So I've been harassed in almost every kind of situation, but especially when I was younger and walking more, it happened all the time.
But one of the first scary experiences I had was when I was 14 years old, and I was, and still am, a runner. So I was out running 6 miles in some neighborhoods near where I lived, and a couple miles into the run, a man started, he was in a car behind me. And at first, he slowed down, and so at first I thought he was maybe looking for a house address. But it was several minutes had gone by, and he was still just really closely following behind me. I felt like, so after a couple more minutes of like rising panic in me, and he was still there, I just sprinted down the nearest side road I could find and just kept sprinting until I got to a more populated area, and he didn't follow me. But it was a really scary experience for me because I wasn't totally sure if he was following me, but it felt like he was, and he was much older. So I wasn't sure what he intended to do, and I was just glad that I got away.
And I think that it's something that I've been experiencing for years. For a lot of my life, it just seems like something that was annoying, that, you know, made me feel all these feelings of anger and humiliation and fear, but that was just part of being a woman.
My earliest experience with street harassment probably started at a very young age, and it wasn't verbal. It was always much more through uncomfortable eye contact from strangers and gestures that just were really uncomfortable. And then it escalated as I got older, where people felt like they could say things to me because I was an adult now. And then it escalated into physical touch, people grabbing me on the street and things like that. I would say as young as 9 years old, you know what I mean? Because I've always had a very mature body, and that kind of played into the things I've experienced in my life.
I was coming back from looking at a place to live in Arlington, and I believe it happened on Quincy Street. And I'm walking down Quincy, and there's this man and his friend, and the guy was loading groceries in his car. And he said, "Hello, lovely." And it was like a dog barking at me, and I ignored him at first. And then he starts, you know, giving me attitude. I said, "That's the reason why I didn't want to talk to you." So I put up my camera, my cell phone, and I took his photo. And then that enraged him. He starts coming close to me, he starts throwing punches at me, threatening me, saying, "Fuck you, bitch, you ain't shit. That's why I don't like black women. That's why I like white women. Fuck you, you ain't shit." And it startled me so much. And I was just so upset that I did not get his license plate. And I called Arlington police. And the officer who arrived, he asked me, "Do you know this guy?" I said, "I've never met this guy before in my life." And he said, "Are you sure you don't know him?" And I felt that because the harasser was black and that I'm black, that he thought that we'd known each other, but I'd never met that guy before. And that terrified me, because I'm usually pretty outspoken against harassers, but in this experience, I was shaken into silence temporarily. And I'm thinking, wow, dag, I mean, I was too afraid to let close friends and family know that that was my story. I submitted it to the Stop Street Harassment sites like Stop Street Harassment, Collective Action, for Safe Spaces. They knew it was my story, but no one in my personal life did until I spoke at an event where I mentioned all my harassers and had this guy's photo. I said, yes, that was me. That was my story. And I was afraid of being blamed at the time, because whenever I confront a harasser, I get told, "Dienna, what were you wearing? Dienna, where were you? What time of day is it? Blah, blah, blah. You should have accepted his compliment. You should have did this. You should have did that." But not often do I hear, "Dienna, thank you for standing up to these men. You know, keep defending your rights." You called me a bitch.
You're a white woman.
I'm white because I don't want to talk to you. If a white guy said the same thing, I would have told him the same thing. I'm trying to walk and have my lunch, and you had to say horrible things to me. Whoa! I got you on camera.
You know, how I got interested in self-defense is that really I was interested in gender-based violence, and I started working on those issues when I was 20, and I worked on what we then called battering, and I worked on the first Take Back the Night March in DC, and I worked at a shelter, and I did all that kind of stuff. But in 1985, I took a self-defense class, and I took a self-defense class because a friend of mine told me it was great, and because I was about to go traveling for a year by myself. I felt like it was a good idea. And I loved the class, and I found it totally life-changing. I had always had this kind of, you know, subtle dialogue with myself that if I was ever attacked, there was nothing I could do because any guy was going to be bigger and stronger than me. And self-defense totally changed that mindset, and I found it totally empowering, and my whole approach to life changed. So I just really got hooked, and you know, started studying it more and more. And then as I started studying it, I wanted to teach it, I wanted to share it, I wanted to, you know, kind of spread the word. And so, so that's how it all started. I hope you can see by looking at this that even though a lot of people think of self-defense as what you do when you get jumped in a rape attempt, I have a much broader approach to what self-defense is. One time ongoing, people you know, people you don't know, not just physical, but also mental, emotional, psychic, taking care of yourself. Also anything you do to heal from anything that you've already been through is part of self-defense. So it's much more holistic. It's not just about hitting, because most of these things don't call for hitting.
I wrote my master's thesis on street harassment in 2007 at George Washington University, and the reason why I wrote my master's thesis on it was my own experiences with street harassment and how I recently had found a website that used the term street harassment, and that was the first time I'd ever heard it used, even though I had experienced it for so many years. So I did some preliminary research, and there was very little information out there on the subject. So I decided to look at how women were using websites to really bring this issue forward and to share their stories. So I turned in my thesis, and my thesis got coverage on CNN.com, and that was several months after I turned in my thesis. And that really changed things because I didn't intend to do anything more with the topic, but that coverage on CNN led to a lot of radio show interviews, a lot of blog posts picked up the issue, and I saw there was a lot of misinformation out there. I also realized that two of the websites I liked the best during my thesis research were gone. So I started my own site, stopstreetharassment.org, and so it was a website and a blog, and that was in 2008. So just since 2008, I've continued to do more and more on this topic. I wrote a book in 2010. I started doing offline activism, so participating in rallies, testifying at city council hearings, really around that time in 2010. And by 2012, I decided to turn Stop Street Harassment into a nonprofit organization.
So two women named Shay Shenoy and Shannon Lindbergh founded CAS. They saw that there was this void in a lot of the activism in DC. There wasn't an organization that was devoted to addressing this specific problem. And that's really what made them come together and want to do something about it. And at that time, the Hollaback framework had existed for a couple years, and that's kind of what they based it on. So for a while it was Hollaback DC and mostly existed online, although they did go and do a bunch of meetings with other activists and other organizations and people in the community and trained a lot of people on the issue and really raised awareness. And then there was a decision made to kind of expand the whole scope of the organization and not focus entirely on the online piece and the online community, even though it's incredibly valuable and central to our work, but also have direct services, more kind of community face-to-face contacts. And as a result of that decision, they changed the name to Collective Action for Safe Spaces, which I think really encompasses our belief that ending street harassment is about changing the culture, and changing the culture is something that is going to require a collective effort on the part of everyone in the community.
SlutWalk DC is an event where people come together to spread awareness. Our main goal is to start the conversation about rape culture and victim blaming. So we come together and create large groups so people in the community can pay attention to us and hear our message. In 2011, it started in 2011 when a Canadian police officer made a public statement saying that if women stopped dressing like sluts, they wouldn't be raped or sexually victimized. And thus the name SlutWalk DC is kind of a play off of his statement. And from there, it kind of escalated into people in the community. SlutWalk Paris, SlutWalk Berlin, SlutWalk DC, SlutWalk Philadelphia. And we're just like-minded individuals trying to change the perception of rape. Well, I'm originally from DC, and last year, which was the second SlutWalk, the organizer, Samantha Lewis, reached out to me on a social networking site. I don't know how we became friends, but she reached out to me. I guess she liked the content of my Facebook, and asked if I wanted to be a volunteer and maybe lead the march. So last year I led the march. I held the banner, helped with chants. And then she asked if I wanted to organize it. And there were things I wanted to change about SlutWalk. I wanted to make it more inclusive. I wanted to make it more in the community. I wanted to change the location. I wanted to broaden the content. So I said yes, and that brought me here. I moved to New York in the middle of all of this, but I still really wanted SlutWalk to happen. So I continued organizing it from wherever I was, and it worked out. SlutWalk wasn't inclusive because, first of all, I would say the location wasn't accessible to the community. It wasn't being promoted to different groups of people. It was very, very white, middle-class, female, and it wasn't touching urban communities. It wasn't touching youth. It wasn't touching trans people. It wasn't touching immigrants. It wasn't touching soldiers. And this year I was really, really focused on reaching out to those people and bringing them here. And I think that it really, really worked. And this year was very colorful, very diverse, and I think it was really successful in making it inclusive this year. I definitely feel like we have a long way to go, but I definitely saw a difference between the previous years and this year. Even with the speakers that I picked this year, we had a transgendered woman, we had a man, we had a Muslim girl, we had people with a crowd from all different backgrounds. We are right in Columbia Heights, which is a very diverse section of the city. So I think that it was successful, and I think we are moving in the right direction.
I don't go anywhere without my headphones because, honestly, on the street with regard to street harassment, and maybe I'm completely off on this, but when I don't acknowledge people yelling at me, or people saying hey, I love your legs, or hey, let me see those tits, or anything like that, if I don't actually acknowledge that I hear it, or I don't hear it, they slow down. They slow down a bit. I think probably one of the hardest experiences I had with street harassment was out on the street with my mother. I had on another little dress, and my sides were out and my legs were out, and there was a man who yelled something really inappropriate that I won't repeat. And I said to him, I said, I'm with my mother, and the least you could do is not do that while I'm here with my mother. And as we were walking away, while he was still in ear range, my mother said to me, you just wait till they're not saying anything to you. You just wait till they're not acknowledging you, or not noticing that you're pretty, or not saying things to you. You just wait, you will miss it. And I mean, to have a hard conversation with her about, sending really mixed messages to people who are engaging in street harassment and are perpetrators. They don't understand that they are doing something that's inappropriate. but then also to talk to her about like, hey, that's not a compliment. That's not being nice. And typically it's not really about you. It's really about them subscribing to like a role in society that they think they have to fill. They think that there's a role they have to play. And it's really not as simple as like, he thought I was pretty. If he really thought I was pretty, he probably wouldn't have yelled out an expletive-laden response to my legs or my dress.
I think the protest that the women are standing for now today is a good thing, but they got to see it for themselves. The way they are dressed now is provocative, and that if they can change the way they dress and can stand for what they're saying, it'll be a good thing. Yes, it attracts the attention because it seems like what a person sees less of on a female, it seems like it makes a man more aggressive. And instead of the man appreciating just seeing the woman as a woman, he sees her as something of a, an object. He don't see it as just a woman just dressing the way she want to dress.
I've worn so many different outfits when I got harassed. Now I realize I'm wearing a shirt that says sexy on it, but I don't think that this shirt should represent what types of attention I get from harassers. I wear this shirt because it makes me feel good. I'm not wearing this shirt because I want a harasser to call me sexy. I don't give a damn about his opinion about me. All I care about is my own opinion about myself. The shirt, not only does it say sexy, it also says powerful, and it says brave, which I feel I'm very brave, and it says cool, and I feel I'm a cool person. The thing is, I don't give a rat's behind that harasser thinks I'm sexy. I don't care about his opinion about me. I feel I'm not, the most, oh my God, I'm so attractive, I'm so gorgeous. That's not me at all. But I feel that I have enough self-esteem to not need it from other people. But I've been harassed wearing a business suit. I've been harassed wearing a martial arts uniform. I've been harassed wearing yoga pants and a t-shirt. I've been harassed in a nice dress when I was going to an employee dinner for my former job. It does not matter what I'm wearing. The harassers will find something to say and they will say it. I can be covered head to toe in a burqa, but they'll still say something. They target anybody and they don't discriminate. I do feel like my voice is silenced as a woman of color. A white woman is stereotyped as being the damsel in distress. She's very demure and timid. She needs protection of a man. Whereas a black woman is stereotyped as being very in your face and aggressive. And these stereotypes work against us. What we need to do is treat all harassment as equal. Harassment is disgusting and it's horrible, regardless of who the harasser is and regardless of who the recipient of harassment is. And I want more people to see that, because it's so sad that because I'm a minority, I feel like I'm not taking it seriously when it comes to harassment. There are times I will see a story written by a woman of color on one of the street harassment blogs, and a white woman will jump in with, it's not just black women, it's not just Hispanic women, it's not just Asian women, but that's not the point. Everyone's story needs to be told, and we need to work together in ways of ending harassment.
Nobody wants to be, nobody wants to be black like me, black like me. Darker than outer space, blacker than my mother's face. Close your eyes just to taste. She's out of style now, call her buckwheat or buckwheater. We don't love her, we mistreat her. Heartstrings, bass thighs. Got the world hypnotized, but all they see is just a body. Nah, all they see is sex. They don't look into her black eyes. They just choose to forget her struggle, her pain. Where she going is going, yeah. Her struggle, her pain, going, and keep going.
Oh, well, the first song that I wrote was Black Like Me, and it was about, I say that I'm falling out of style nobody wants to be black like me. And it's just from my thoughts of what I feel like in society they're trying to eliminate. As a black woman, I would say our blackness, you know, with reports all over the world with people using skin bleach and little girls being ashamed of how dark they are. So basically, I wanted to make a song or a lot of my music that uplifts the black woman and uplifts women to just be free and thankful in what they are, you know, and the power of that. Because I like to read a lot about and research the Mother Goddess, and that's why I call myself Moor Mother Goddess, Moor being the original black, to bring back that so-called religion. I like to call it unity among women. Well, I think it's, people usually see me as if I'm going to be violent. So I feel when people approach me on the street harassing me, they're looking for some sort of fight with me. And I feel like as a black woman, because of how I look, you know, it seems like I'm intimidating or, you know, that I'm looking for a fight.
I asked a very simple question in a nationwide survey. Went out to men, women, and kids all over the country and eventually went around the world. I heard from women all over the world eventually. But the question was so simple. Have you personally ever stopped a harasser? On the street, on the job, in sports or athletics, in your local park, on the bus, anywhere? Have you ever had a successful encounter where you stopped a harasser? What did the harasser do? What did you do? What worked? And this is before we had the internet. So women wrote and women sent phone calls and women sent telegrams saying, here's what happened, here's what I did, it kind of worked. Here's what happened and it worked great. And I analyzed all the different techniques, the stories that women told from their own experience, because I believe in listening to women's experience of our lives. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women wrote in, and the techniques that work all had the same core structure. It was very deeply grounded in both martial arts theory and nonviolent social change. There's a reason why these techniques work. They're not random. And my contribution was to really analyze that and to put together the book, Back Off, which talks about how to do these things, how to do this set of techniques. And the book was really amazing to write. It's all success stories. And it was very positive. I won't say it was easy. It was one of the toughest years of my life. But I love the fact that I managed to do it. I love the fact that ever since then it's been used by women, not just all over the country, but all over the world, as sort of the handbook for how you stop harassers, what actually works, what really works.
I actually had to use that in a very dangerous situation some years ago. I was running errands on a Saturday afternoon up at Kearl Park, which is a nice suburb just north of here, by myself. And the creep in the alley was waiting for some woman to walk down that sidewalk by herself. He didn't know me, he was just waiting for a woman. That was his scenario that he had in mind. He's gonna grab some woman who's walking by herself. I happen to be by myself, I'm running errands. I get to this alleyway, there's a bank in the alley and a bunch of stores. The nearest people were up at the corner way ahead of me. And I'm trotting up the street, and all of a sudden, boom, I'm at this alley, and this guy, white guy, late 30s, late 20s probably, in front of me, unzipped, full erection, sick look on his face, and he's reaching for me. It's like 1 second from throwing me into the alley. And I stopped, and I went to the stance, right? I told you, stand strong. And I had time to say one thing, right? There's nobody near me, so I used kind of a loud voice. I said, you in the blue shirt, put the penis back in the pants right now. And at the P word, everybody up and down the street looked, right, and started coming toward me. And he wilted. I have never seen a guy deflate so fast in my life. It was so shocking, it was so unexpected. I was supposed to be a scared victim. He would have been ready if I'd been a screaming crazy lady victim cussing him out. He would have been ready for that response. Or just a scared, shocked, silent victim. He was ready for that. But I didn't do either of those victim responses. I did what I've been taught to do, which is to stand tall and name the behavior. And it was so interesting to see how it worked. He tries to zip it up and he's like backing into the alley and looking really confused, and I'm just standing there. I had to be careful for a second. And a woman I didn't even know came and stood right beside me, right, from somewhere up the street. Put your hands on your hips. And she did a classic nonviolent confrontation statement, naming the principle of you. She said, this is about respect. Don't you even think about trying that again. Stop exposing yourself. And and stood there like that. I mean, don't we look like we own the street? And I looked at her and said, that's great. That's called nonviolent confrontation. You know, we teach that. She said, I know. I took your class 3 years ago. I arrest people on my own students. Thank you for showing off how you do it.
I was, you know, on my way to work, and this guy was just in the metro being very loud. I had my headphones on, and I was listening to the music, but he was so loud that, you know, I was even hearing what he was saying. And he came to me, and I was trying to ignore him at first, but then, you know, he came into my face, like trying to, you know, get my attention. So I told him, hey, what's going on? How may I help you? And he was like, yeah, you know, he needs some money, and, you know, he's trying to get something to eat, and all this and that. You know, I felt sorry for him, so I gave him $2. But then I told him, you know, there's no need to really be out loud, and, you know, kids are around here, you know, everybody is trying to have a normal day. Like, you're just invading everybody's space right now, you know. He said, yeah, but he's hungry, and, you know, he needs some help. So I said, well, here's my $2, and I give him also my CD. I said, oh, listen to some music, relax, you know. I hope you enjoy my CD, and, you know, have a good day, you know. So I thought that would help him, and he would go on and get out of the metro, but then I saw him, he stepped out of the metro and went to another station and started doing the same thing all across the station to other people. And I'm like, wow, I think some people out there, that's what they do on a regular basis. And it doesn't matter like how much money you give them or how you're trying to help them. They just tune into harassing other people out there. So I was wondering, you know, if my $2 really helped him or not, but I guess I'll never know. And hopefully, you know, we can do something about this.
Our biggest accomplishment to date, I would say, is our advocacy with WMATA, which really started with a decision. We had been kind of ignored by them for a long time, even though we'd been getting submissions, so many submissions, and continue to get a lot of submissions from people who were harassed on the WMATA system. Some of them showed that the response by WMATA, either by station managers, transit police, or whoever was around and who the incident was reported to, was not sensitive and was not satisfying to the survivors. We had tried to open a discussion with them for a long time, and it didn't really work, so we ended up going to the DC Council oversight hearing on their budget. Several people from our organization testified, and we also were able to get a few people from the community to testify and talk about their experiences. I think that really opened a lot of eyes in DC. It was pretty well covered in the media. And one of the great things that happened as a result of our advocacy was that WMATA ended up putting anti-harassment PSAs in the entire metro system, including buses. And they're going to continue, you know, refreshing those images and the messages that are coming out. And that, I think, is amazing, you know, because it's hard to avoid those messages. And whatever the conversations are that happen about them, at least they're happening. And at least people are starting to talk about it and understand what happens on the metro to some people.
So Stop Street Harassment has several upcoming activities. I'm just launching the pilot program for Safe Public Spaces Mentoring Program, and I'll be working with 2 to 3 different groups around the world as they initiate a project in their community. So I'll be mentoring them. Stop Street Harassment will provide them with some financial support, and I'll be able to connect them to a lot of different organizations and networks to help them along. Right now I have a summer intern who is working on a Know Your Rights toolkit. In this Know Your Rights toolkit, we are working on a state-by-state guide of relevant laws related to street harassment. So for example, you know, a lot of verbal harassment is not illegal, but things like groping or public indecency are illegal. So writing down what those laws are in each state and how to report them, I think could be very useful for people. Another example of a program is documenting street harassment in America. So Stop Street Harassment is fundraising to do the first ever nationally representative research report on street harassment, and that will include a survey. And then I'm also doing focus groups with different communities across the country, such as Native Americans in South Dakota, sex workers in Los Angeles, queer women of color in New York, and gay and bisexual men in Washington, D.C., to hear what their stories and their experiences are with street harassment.
We've been wanting to launch Right Rides in DC, which Right Rides is an award-winning program that started in New York, and it provides free and safe rides home to women and LGBTQ identifying community members on Friday and Saturday nights, late at night. So, and it's run by volunteers, and it's really amazing. It's just, it fills in such an important gap in transportation, and it's even more necessary here, I think, because our public transportation system doesn't run very late at night. So the mission of Right Rides, or the motto, I should say, is that a safe ride home shouldn't be a luxury. And so I think we're very, very close to launching that and making that happen, which is amazing and exciting. The other big program that we're working on is called Safe Bars, and the idea behind Safe Bars is that so much harassment and assault, as we know from our blog and also from some studies that we do know about or have happened on this issue, happens in bars, and a lot of assault is facilitated by alcohol. In fact, alcohol is the #1 most commonly used substance to facilitate sexual assault. And the thought behind Safe Bars is that there is this group of people, namely bar staff, bartenders, security, bar backs, everyone who can really play a role in making sure that these things don't happen if we can educate them on how they can do that. And so Safe Bars is going to be a bystander intervention training for bar staff, where we will show them, skills and tactics that they can use in real situations that they will experience to stop assault and stop harassment in their bars. So we're really, really excited about that.
I don't think street harassment is going anywhere anytime soon. We have a lot of power imbalances and oppression in our world, and they're going to take a lot of work to undo. I do think we're, kind of pulling the string of undoing it, but it's a long time before the garment is going to unravel. I hope that because there are more people out there taking care of themselves, walking confidently, who are willing to stand up to a harasser, set a limit with someone in a public space or even at a workplace or something like that, that it does change the dynamic. It certainly changes how you feel about yourself, and I hope that over time it changes the dynamic. And there are all kinds of people doing all kinds of cool work to end street harassment. What I do is only one piece of that giant puzzle, and I think it is making a difference in the world, and I am, at base, an optimist. When you ask about the future of street harassment, I kind of think of that Martin Luther King quote about the moral arc of history bends toward justice. It bends really slowly, but I do think, this is a problem that 20, 30 years ago didn't even have a name, never mind anybody working on it, and never mind anybody standing up against it. So I do think we're headed in the right direction, but I'm not going to throw a party anytime soon.
We have a long way to go to stop harassment, but I am absolutely certain we can stop harassment in the next 5 years, worldwide. We have a toolkit of techniques that work, 30 tested techniques that work worldwide. We just need to train a couple more million people how to do them. We have the power of nonviolent social change, the sense of equality that is, in fact, very deep in people around the world. And harassment is an issue that everybody gets, if you've ever been harassed, because it's so basic. It's about the right to walk down the street without abuse, to go to school, to ride the bus without being groped and grabbed. It's so basic and so real, so much a part of our lives. If you have a problem that people see and experience, and you have a toolkit of techniques that work, you've got a solution. My goal in life personally is no more easy targets, no more silent victims, No more people feeling helpless and afraid when they're harassed. I've taught, one of my students estimated, I've taught somewhere over 250,000 people this toolkit of techniques to stop harassers around the world. I want everybody to know how to do this. I want no more easy targets. When you're harassed, I want you to have a whole toolkit of choices to do. The low-key techniques, the mid-level techniques, the stronger advanced techniques if you need them. I want you to know how to handle it. It's just like verbal judo. I want to teach everybody this verbal judo because we can stop harassment. The harassment is uglier. It is more vicious. It is more sexually violent. It is targeting gays. It is targeting people of color. It's not just women. But we have a toolkit that works.
I still feel we have ways to go in terms of the battle against street harassment. I think we've made a lot of progress in the fight against it, but I feel that no matter what we do, there is always going to be a new harasser, new harassment challenges. And I don't think it's going to end in my lifetime. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But until it ends, I'm just going to keep fighting against it. That's all I can do. I can't sit idly by and let this continue to happen. I'm going to do all in my power to put an end to street harassment.
I'm very positive, and I do envision a better world, and I am very, very just passionate about making the world different, but I'm also very honest in terms of what's happening now, and I do feel like we have a very, very long way to go, and I'll just be really honest about that. I do see things changing, but that's from my perspective of an organizer and seeing it from the inside. But as a person walking down the street, an everyday woman, I do think that we have a very, very, very long way to go in terms of changing street harassment in the city.
I think that we do have a long way to go, but I'm not demoralized by that. I'm inspired by it because I think that the activists that are working on this issue now, both in DC and around the world, are building a movement. And you know, even the people who talk to their friends about their experiences or who submit to our blog, they're building the movement too. And as long as we make sure the movement is diverse and intersectional, then we create a sustainable movement and something that will carry on through generations. And that to me is really inspiring and exciting. And I know that, you know, maybe it won't be for many years, but I know that the changes that we dream about and we envision as activists will be real someday. So I think that's really inspiring and amazing, even though we do have a lot of work ahead of us.
With the issue of street harassment, I think we do have a long ways to go until it will end. Right now, street harassment is often still seen as a compliment or a joke or just something that, you know, there's nothing we can do about. So I think we have a long ways to go until those attitudes completely change and until we can really get people to take this issue seriously enough to work comprehensively enough to be able to stop it. But I do have a lot of hope, just even in the last few years, of seeing that happen, and that it's not like some dream that will never happen, that it actually can happen. In the past couple of years, we've seen the United Nations launch a global program to address harassment in public spaces. The New York City Council has held a hearing, and council members have spoken at rallies, and they've done safety audits. And in Washington, D.C., the Transit Authority and city council members and local organizations have come together to address harassment on the transit system. So those are just 3 examples of major organizations that have, in the past 3 or 4 years, really embraced this issue and recognized that it's a problem. So I think as more and more people speak out and share their stories and bring attention to this issue, we will, and demand change, we will see more organizations deciding, yes, we need to do something, and we will do something.
Your neighborhood is going to be safer for the rest of your life because of what you're going to teach your neighbors that you learned today. Thank you for making my neighborhood in DC safer by being part of this program. And wherever I am in my life, if I'm walking down a block that you've made safer 10, 20 years from now, I'm just going to thank you up front right now for making my life safer too. Every neighborhood you're in will be safer. filming us and putting us on movie star all over the world.